Hi, everyone. Today we are going to math in Excel spreadsheets. Now we're going to use Excel because that's what Nightingale uses for their spreadsheet application. But these skills that you're going to learn today would also translate to other spreadsheet apps such as Google Sheets or Apple Numbers. So we're going to start super basic. You don't have to have any experience with Excel or spreadsheets at all. We're going to start basic, and by the end of this hour, we're going to go into crazy advanced. And so the hope is if you're here live, you're going to get some good tips out of this, and you can also ask questions while you're here. I'll be looking at the chat. Also, if you're watching this recorded, you can go back and rewatch certain sections several times so that you know, and you can follow along with a spreadsheet open and kind of go back and forth and try out some of the things that I'm going to show you today. So the first thing I'm going to do is share my screen so that you can see a spreadsheet. So here we have a blank workbook. And the way that this works in Excel is you have your spreadsheet. That's this part of the page that you're seeing. It's all of these cells. So each one of these boxes is called a cell. And the cells are identified by, and if you look here in this little box here, it's identifying the cells by name. And so the name of the cells are given by which column, A, B, C, D, and so on and so forth, and which row, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so on and so forth, that box is in. So we identify the column and the row, and that tells us the box. So if I were to look for cell F11, I would go to column F, and then I'd go down to row 11, and that would be this cell right here. And you can see when I clicked on it, this box changed to F11. You can also use this box to go to any cell you want. Let's say I wanted to go to P30. I can just type P30 into this box, and it will bring me over to that cell. And we're going to use this feature a little bit later when we start making larger data sets and we want to skip down to a certain cell in the spreadsheet, because scrolling that far would take a long time. If we can jump right to that cell, it makes things a lot easier. All right. So let's start by putting in some numbers into our spreadsheet application. So I'm just going to type in some numbers, and we always want to type data set values in a column vertically. We don't want to type in our values across different columns. The way that Excel is built and meant to be used is to have a column of numbers all together. So I'm just going to type in some data. I'm just making this up as we go. And some people would say that this is random, but it's not, because it's coming from my brain, and my brain cannot be random. And so these are not random numbers, but I am just making these up as I go along. So I can click and drag. So with my mouse, I'm clicking and dragging to highlight multiple cells. But you can see if I just highlight all of the data along the bottom of the window, you're going to get some information. It tells us about the average. It tells us how many values there are, and it tells you what all of those numbers added together would be. And so if you just highlight a bunch of data, it will just do some statistics for you without you having to do any other work. And here it is. So the average is 14.1818, and so on. The count is 11. The sum is 156. Okay. Now let's say I just wanted to confirm that sum, and I wanted to add together all of these numbers. Now you can create a formula in Excel, and it knows math. So if I'm in a cell, I can start a formula. So I'm in this cell D3, and I can start a formula. So to start a formula, all we have to do is hit the equal sign on the keyboard. And once you hit the equal sign, Excel knows that you're creating a formula. And I can do stuff like add these numbers together. When I add them together, I get 156, which I think is what it told me the sum was before. Now, this is great. I created a formula, and here's the formula. But I still typed in every number. And let's say these numbers change. And I want to update this sum. Then I'd have to retype all the numbers. Or let's say we added some numbers to this list. So let's just say I'm adding some extra numbers here. I'm doing that incorrectly. Here, I was hitting plus instead of enter. So another thing is when you hit enter on your keyboard, it's going to go down a cell. If you hit tab on your keyboard, it's going to go to the right. And if you do shift tab, it's going to go left. If you do shift enter, it's going to go up. So shift is like if you hold shift while you're doing other things, it kind of undoes or goes in the opposite direction. So enter is down, shift enter is up, tab is right, shift tab is left. And I worked with someone who was in spent the first 10 years of their career on Wall Street, crunching numbers in a spreadsheet, and he told me that if you really know Excel, or the goal was to really know Excel well enough so that you never had to actually use the mouse to navigate Excel, you would just use the keyboard. And you can do that also with the left and right arrows and up and down arrows. But if you're typing in numbers and then you hit enter, it's going to go down. But if you're typing in numbers and then you hit tab, it's going to go to the right. So these are just things to think about. I am not at the point where I can do a whole Excel spreadsheet and not use the mouse at all. So I just added another number. Let's add just a few more numbers here, just to get a sense. So now we have 16 numbers on here. And the bad thing is now I'd have to type in those numbers manually again. The point of Excel is to never have to type numbers into a formula, except maybe if it's like a constant multiple or something. So the idea here is if I want to sum up all of these numbers that are in column A, I can use one of the built-in functions. And if you click on this button here, there's a function menu that you can go to. And you can see the first function that comes up is sum. Then there's average, there's an if, hyperlink, count, max. Okay, so these are functions that they're telling me are my most recently used, but I think these are just probably the most frequently used defaults because I haven't really used a ton of these formulas other than the sum, average, if. I've actually used count if on this machine more than anything else probably. So I'm going to cancel this because I know that the formula here that I want to use is called sum. And so I'm just going to type that in. I can say sum, I can open the parentheses, and now it wants my numbers. Now I could type in the numbers again, but this is kind of silly. I would put a comma between them and type in my numbers. So I could sum up these three numbers and it will give me 23. But again, if these numbers update, I'm not getting new sums. This sum is what we call static. It will not change. It will not update in real time. Instead of typing in these numbers, I could just click on this column, column A, or I could type in A:A, and it does the same thing. It highlights that whole column. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave column A with just my data in it. I'm not going to put anything else in column A so that when I do a formula like sum, if I want to add up all the numbers, sum will do that for that whole column, and I hit enter, and it's added those numbers together, and I didn't have to do anything. And you can see that sum matches up with the sum that's down here in the bottom when I highlight all of this data. If I go back to my original data set by deleting these values, you can see that in real time, this number is updating. And that's what we want, because as we gather more data or we have numbers that we're doing, or even if we made a typo and we just wanted to change this, oh, this wasn't supposed to be a 95, this was supposed to be a 9. And you change that value and look what happens. This updates in real time. So now we have a bit of an understanding, hopefully, of built-in formulas. Again, if you want to create your own formula, you can, but you can also use the built-in functions that Excel has. And anytime I want to do a formula, my own formula, or use a function that's built into Excel, I just need to make sure that my first move is to hit the equal sign. And as soon as I hit the equal sign, you can even see now I have some options here to do stuff with my data. We can find the standard deviation. We can count up how many data values are. We can find the average, which in this case is the mean. There are two other types of averages, median and mode. And so that gives you just a basic idea of how numbers should be put into Excel, should be put into columns, how you can create your own formula. Let's say I wanted to add every other number and subtract the other ones. I don't know what I would be doing this for, but I can hit equals, and then I can say I'm going to take this and I'm going to add it to this, and then I'm going to add it to this and add it to that and add it to that and add it to that. And then I'm going to subtract all of these values. So I'm making up my own formula, and you can click the cells and it references those cells and it tells me that the answer is 6. And the great part about that is if I change a value like 10 to 90, which is going to make a big difference in the sum part. So this number should get bigger. And there it goes. It gets a lot bigger. Okay. So if I change 9 to 90, or I don't even know what it was. I think it was 10 a second ago. Okay. So that gives us an idea of the power that using formulas gives us. It will update things in real time, which is just fabulous. The other reason we might want to do this is we can actually generate data by using, we can use random functions to help us generate our data. And so back to a blank spreadsheet. Let's say I want to let's say I want to simulate rolling one die, like a 6-sided die. I want to simulate rolling that 100 times. Okay. Now I could make up the number that comes on the die, but that's not going to be random because it's coming from my brain. And so let's say I wanted to roll a die 100 times. So I want to keep track of which roll is which. So I'm going to number these rolls. Now I can start counting, but this is going to be a little time consuming to go all the way down to 100. So I want to show you another feature of Excel that's pretty cool. Is if you start counting like this and then you highlight that, there's this little box in the corner here. Now that box is going to autofill for you. So if you make sure that the crosshairs here turn from that white crosshair to this black crosshair, you can then click and drag down and you can see that it's continuing to count. It knew that I was counting, and so it's auto-filling, and I can just drag this down until I get to 100. I overshot it by a lot, but I can go to 100 rolls really quickly. Okay, so it just counted for me. Now, I want to show you a different way that you can do this in case you wanted to do more rolls in the future, which we will. By the end of this, I'm going to simulate rolling 5 dice 10,000 times. And we're gonna, analyze some of the data. We're gonna count some stuff. We're gonna get really advanced. But for right now, we're just gonna roll 100 times. But I just want to show you that I can, in this cell, instead of typing the number 2, I can say, let's take the previous cell, the cell that's right above it, and add 1 to it. That also gives me 2. So this is really what this formula is saying is take the cell that's directly above this current cell and add 1 to it. If I drag that down, it's also doing the same thing. It's counting because it's going to take the previous cell. Notice that when I drag it down, the reference to the cell also changes. This is saying take A4. It's saying still take the cell that's directly above the cell that I'm in. And so the cell number or the row number actually updates as I drag this down as well. And this will continue till I get to 100. So there's 2 different ways that you could count. You can use the autofill feature and have Excel realize that you were trying to count, and it will continue to count for you. Or you can just say, take the previous cell and add 1 to it. And then I want to know what the result is. So I roll the die, and I want to know what the result is. So I'm going to use a built-in function here. And that built-in function is called rand. Now, rand is just going to generate a random number between 0 and 1. But I don't want that. I want rand between, because I'm simulating rolling a dice. And so I can pretend like I'm rolling a die if I say that I want a random number between 1 and 6. This will give me numbers between 1 and 6, including 1 and including 6. And this one happened to be 2. Now here's the brilliant part. I can use this autofill feature and drag this down, but Excel is smart. It knows that there's a column right next to it that has the roll number, and that roll number stops here at row 101, which is roll 100. It's 1 off because we used the top to label. Our first row was a label instead of numbers. But if I just double click on this corner, the autofill corner, it knows to only copy down to match up with the column that's right next to it, which is really awesome. So now I have simulated rolling a die 100 times. It didn't take me very long to do that. And now we can do some fun stuff. We can count the number of times that certain numbers come up. So I know that when I'm rolling a die, the only numbers that can come up are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. Those are the only options when I'm rolling a 6-sided die, are these 6 numbers, okay? So those are the values that I can get. And then I can figure out of the 100 times that I rolled the die, how many times did a 1 come up? How many times did a 2 come up? That might be something that I want to know. And so I can count that up. And so this is a little bit more of an involved formula because it actually requires 2 inputs. So I'm going to hit the equal sign to say that I'm starting a formula. And I'm going to count if. Okay, so this count if formula. And it takes 2 arguments. You can see the great thing about this is as you're typing, it kind of tells you, all right, you need 2 things separated by a comma. You need the range, which is the part of the spreadsheet that you want this formula to look at. And then you want the criteria, which is what is it looking for? So what I want this COUNTIF function to look at is the results column here. So I want it to look at column B. Now I'm going to hit a comma so that it knows that I'm ready for the criteria. And I want it to count up all the 1s. So I'm clicking on the cell that's right next to me. And I'm going to close the parentheses. and it says it found 13. But you might have noticed that as soon as I hit enter, these numbers changed. So because I randomly generated these numbers using a function, every time I update the spreadsheet, everything recalculates, meaning the rand between generates a new number between 1 and 6. I'm going to drag this down, copy it down, use the autofill feature, and it's automatically, look what it's doing. It's looking at column B, but now it's looking for all the 3s. And in the next one down, it's looking for all the 4s, and it's looking for all the 5s and all the 6s. And you can see, we know that it's, if you have a fair die, that it's equally likely for every side of the die to land up. And so it's equally likely I'm going to roll a 1 or a 2 or a 3 or a 4 or a 5 or a 6. But you can see for only 100 rolls, it doesn't come out exactly even because this is real life. We're simulating what would really happen. And sometimes in real life, we don't always get, even amounts of 1s and 2s and 3s. Sometimes you get a bunch of, looks like we got a bunch of 3s and not so many 5s. Got a bunch of 6s, but not so many 5s. But as soon as I roll the die again, I can hit Control R, and that will refresh. That's not what it should refresh the spreadsheet. Yeah. So if you hit Control R, it'll refresh the spreadsheet, and so we get a whole new set of rolls. And you can see sometimes the numbers are really close together, and sometimes they're not. I saw a 9 in there a minute ago. That was very lopsided. Here's a 10. We only got 10 1s, but we got 24 4s. So it's not always going to come out even Steven. There's an 8. We only got 2 8s in there. And this is what randomness is about. It's not evenness. It's truly random. And our brains aren't great at randomness. We might think, hey, there's something wrong with this particular die that I've been rolling. Maybe it's heavier on one side or another. But no, if you're only doing 100 rolls, it's not going to come out even. And sometimes it'll come out really lopsided, like having 8 2s. Yeah, it's math. All right, so let's look at some of the other formulas that you would want to use on a daily basis. So I'm gonna generate a data set here. Let's just call it numbers. And I'm gonna do what I did earlier, and I'm just gonna type in some numbers. Here, I'm not even really paying attention to the numbers that I'm typing in. I'm just typing things on the keyboard. Okay. So here is a data set. We have 11 numbers. Let's explore some of the other things some of the common formulas that we have. We already talked about finding the sum. And the sum is adding up all the numbers, right? So sum means to add up all the numbers. And there is a formula for that. And that formula is sum. And so we can add up all the numbers that are in column J. Even though I have a title here, it's only going to sum up the numbers. It's going to ignore the cell that says numbers in it because there's no number there. And we get 6,859. Then I can also find the average. Now, when we say average, usually what we're talking about is called the mean. So the mean, we use the average formula for. And this is one that you would use a lot. Again, I'm going to find the average of everything happening in column J here. And that's 623. But there are other averages. So there's another average called the mode. And the mode is just the one that occurs the most number of times. And because I was typing these in, I don't even think I repeated any numbers. And so if I were to use the built-in formula, which is called mode, now you can use the one called mode. This is a legacy formula. It's compatible with older versions of Excel. But now we have more options for mode. There's mode.mult, which means if there's more than one mode, it will actually tell you what all of them are. It'll list them in different cells vertically. And then there's mode.single, which just gives you the most frequently occurring. And if there are other frequently occurring ones, I think it's just going to give you the lowest number. So I like mode.mult because it's going to give me the mode if there's multiple modes, and that's J. And it's going to tell me, oh yeah, I did. I typed in 25 twice. I didn't even notice that. So 25 happened twice, so that's my mode. And then there's a third type of average. And the third type of average is called a median. And there is a formula for that as well. It's called, oddly enough, median. And so median is the number that's in the middle. So if you're in Math 220, you should know about how to calculate the median. You would have to put the numbers in order, and then you would find the one that's directly in the middle. Here I have 11 data points, so there is an actual middle. But the median formula is going to do all that for me. It's going to sort in the formula and tell me what the middle one is without me having to do it. So it's telling us 32 is. Speaking of sorting, what if I did want to sort this data from smallest to biggest? I can highlight the data, click and drag. So I click, if I only click and then I lift up the click, then dragging doesn't do anything. But I have to click and drag down. So hold down the click. Now I can let go of the click. And I can sort and filter up here in the home menu. So you have your ribbon up here, and there's a lot of different things you could do in an Excel spreadsheet. We just want to sort and filter, or we want the home tab, sorry. And so in sort and filter, we're going to sort smallest to largest, and it will just sort the data. And we can see now that 32 is right in the middle of this data set, which is why this formula was able to calculate that for me. And notice that when I sorted it, everything stayed the same, even though I switched the order, because I'm using functions built into Excel, and I'm telling it just find column J. I could put a number down here, then it's going to start messing things up. Okay. Now, I put in 32. The reason I got an error here is because it's saying there's now two modes, 25 and 32. Now, I'm pretty sure that the average went down, but not down that much. I don't think these cells count as zeros, but we wouldn't want to keep this here. We would want to make sure that our data stays sorted and all together. So we would want that 32 to be up in the middle. And now that we have an even number, you can see there's two 32s in the middle, which is why the median didn't change, because we would actually average these two numbers, but we didn't have to. So those are the popular formulas that you would want to use, especially if you are in a statistics situation. Let's talk about some non-statistics situations. Let's say that you have data on some people. Maybe they're employees, maybe they're your friends. I don't know what they are, but let's just say we have some names. So John, say, yeah, Way, Dorothy. So we have some names here, and we have some ages. Okay. So let's say that John is 41, and Jose is 24, and Maria is 29, and Hui is 36, and Dorothy is 52. So we have two things in this data set. We have a name and we have an age. Now we can sort these things, but if I sort them, let's say I wanted to sort this alphabetically from A to Z, it's going to ask me, hey, do you want to expand this selection? And you would, because you wouldn't want the ages to no longer go with the names. So you would expand the selection and it would sort. And you can see that now this is alphabetical, and then we have the age. Okay. But another thing we can do with data that we have is we can turn that data into a table within Excel. So I've highlighted this whole table, and I want to insert a table here. Sorry, I've highlighted these cells, and I want to insert a table instead of having these cells. So I'm going to click on the table button, and it's saying, where's the data? And it's there. It's highlighted already because I highlighted it. And we do want to click that my table has a header, because what this allows me to do is the name and the age are going to stay where they are. Those are my headers. And so now what this allows me to do is not only sort A to Z if I wanted to, but I could also sort by largest to smallest in terms of, or smallest to largest in terms of age. And you can see that we get this, it knows it's sorting here. But I can also, do an advanced sort if I wanted to. For example, I could sort by age, but then have the names alphabetical if there were names that were the same age. Okay. In this case, I only have 5 names in here, so we don't need to do that. But if I had a large list of names, it allows me to apply filters to this, and you can see I can put some filters in there, create custom filters, or I can custom sort if I wanted to. So there are no colors right now, but I could sort by color if I wanted to, but there's no color going on. But if I wanted to, I could say, let's sort by age, right? But then by name, A to Z. And that didn't do anything here because, again, we only had 5 names. But if I added another name to this list, let's say we had Zoe. And Zoe is also 36 years old. Okay. And now I can go in and sort again. So we want to do that advanced custom sort where we're sorting by age and then by name. So I hit OK, and you can see that the two 36-year-olds were still sorting from age smallest to largest, but then the two 36-year-olds are sorted alphabetically. And you can see it knows that it's sorting all here in these two things. It's sorting both columns. Before, when I was just sorting from smallest to largest, it only did one column. And so tables are a great way to be able to look through a large data set and do some fun things with it. All right, let's talk about some other elements to the Excel spreadsheet here. We have this large spreadsheet, and we can pretty much fill up as far as the eye could see. You could keep scrolling for a very long time. We don't necessarily want to do that. So what I'm going to do is, this is just one sheet. I can also have multiple tabs on my spreadsheet file. And so in sheet 2, we're going to do some more with rolling some dice. And I just want to show you kind of some cool features that you can do, like if we really get advanced and into it. So we're going to do the same thing where we label the roll. But what I'm going to do is I want to roll 10,000 times. So I'm actually going to go down to the cell 10,002. So now I'm down in A2002, and I'm just going to write the word stop here. And the reason I'm doing that is because, first of all, why did I type that in instead of scrolling down? Because look at me scroll back up. This is taking forever. I don't want to do this. I'm only at 9,000, not even. Okay, so I'm going to type back in A1, and that will bring me back up to the top. So the reason that I wanted to do that is because I want this to move really quickly. So I'm going to put a 1 here. This is my first roll. And then I'm going to do what I did last time is I'm going to take the previous cell and add 1 to it. And now I can copy this formula. And this is the greatest trick in all of Excel. I can do Control Shift down, and it will highlight all the cells between where I was and the next, like where the text stops. So there were just all these spaces in between. And so it's actually going to stop where I told it to stop. It doesn't know that I meant stop, but it just knew there was something written in there. And so now if I hit Control V, so I hit Control C to copy the formula, Control V is going to paste the formula, and you can see that it's counting all the way. Let's see what's happening in cell 10,002. Okay, I went over too far, so I should have just done to 10,000. So I'm just going to delete that cell, but I have 10,000 rolls counted up now. And I'm not just going to roll 1 die, I'm going to roll 6 die. 5 die. Let's do 5. 6 is a little excessive. So let's pretend we're playing Yahtzee, right? So you got your 5 dice, you're going to roll them, and we're going to use that same rand between function, which is a ton of fun. And here's the beauty. Watch this. I'm going to drag this over. So I'm copying the rand between function over, and now I'm going to double click, and we just created 10,000 simulated rolls of a dice, of 5 dice, 10,000 times. Again, I can scroll down there. It's all filled in. And I did that in no time at all. So let's say I was interested to know, like as I'm going, what's the average, what's the sum that I'm getting on all the dice? Maybe this game has to do with summing up the dice. So I want to know, what's the sum of the roll? Okay. And if you're typing in a cell and you go past it, it's going to go into the next one. Let's say sum of roll and a bunch of other words. So it's just going to go into the next cell until you put something in one of these cells. Like if I put the number 11 here, now that gets cut off. We don't love that. Okay. So you can always, there's 2 options here. You can wrap the text and it will wrap it in the cell, keeping the column the same width that it is right now. Or what I like to do is I like to make the column bigger. So I don't actually need all of these words here, but however big the column is, if you're up here in the column, you can see select the whole column. But when you come in between 2 columns, you can see this, my cursor changes to this like arrow, and I can drag and make this whatever width I want, or I can just double click it and it will automatically make it the perfect width for whatever's in it. So now let's find the sum. I want to find the sum of this particular roll. Roll number 1 is all of these numbers here. So if you're wondering, like, how did you do that without clicking and dragging, I can show you. When you're in your formula, it's going to start on the cell that you're in, creating the formula in. I hit the arrow key to the left, and it's here. Now I hit Shift, and I keep hitting the arrow key to the left, and it will keep highlighting everything until I let go of Shift, which I'm not going to because that's exactly what I wanted to highlight, was all of those. So my first roll had a sum of 18. If I double click on this, it'll give me the sum of every roll. And you can see these numbers are changing again because every time I do something, the whole spreadsheet recalculates and I get new numbers on this die roll. Okay. So the sum is cool. So earlier we talked about how the numbers we get on a die should be pretty even because it's equally likely to happen. I bet you if we revisit that and we look at the value of die 1, just die 1, we know we're going to get only these values. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We can count if. We're going to count die 1, and we're going to count whether it's a 1 or not. Now, these are 10,000 rolls instead of 100 rolls. And so there's a lot more times that the 1 comes up. But you can see that these numbers seem closer together than they did before because now I have more rolls. And this gets into something called like the central limit theorem. Just make sure that formula is good. The formula is good. And when I hit Control R, it's going to refresh everything. And you can see that it's not, I mean, sometimes some numbers are rolled more than others, but generally this is pretty straight across, all in the 1600s, mid 1600s, low 1600, high 1600s, but pretty much 1600s. Occasionally we have something crazy like a 1700. But if I wanted to look at this visually, I could graph this by inserting a graph. In this case, a histogram would be a good way to look at this data, but not with this setup. So I can double click on the bars here and I can change. Actually, I don't think I want a built-in histogram at all. I think what I want to do is I want to link the two things together. So I create a scatter plot. And then I can change that scatter plot into a bar graph, column graph. And that's exactly what I want. Make the gap width go to 0. So this is an advanced thing, and I'm just totally blown right past it without really giving any explanation. But you can see on this one, this is where the 2 was highly favored. But in general, what we're going to see is, or maybe we're not going to see, but typically you're going to see an even graph across. This isn't so even. I bet you if we made sure that the scale was appropriate. So on a graph like this, we probably want 0 to be my min. And then we're going to see, there we go. The appropriate scale is going to give us our relative differences between these columns. And now we can see not a whole lot of difference between these. And as I refresh, you can see this is pretty much straight across. Even when there are some differences in the numbers on the scale from 0 to 1600 or 1800 that we have here, these graphs are straight across. And that's what we're looking for. All right, so let's get back to the sum here. Let's say I'm playing a game and I want to know, well, like what are the possible sums that I could have? Well, because I'm rolling 5 dice, if all 5 dice had a 1 on it, the smallest number I could get is a 5. And then if all the dice had 6s on them, the biggest number I could get is 30. So my possible sums are going to go from 5 to 30. And again, I'm interested to know how many times did each sum show up? So I'm going to count if. This time I'm going to count the column that has the sums in it. And I want to know how many times did a 5 come up? And I can drag this down, and it counted them all up. Now, what's different between looking at the value of one die and looking at the values of the counts, you can see this is no longer a uniform distribution, and it shouldn't be. Having every single die land on a 1 is not going to happen as often as having the die add up to 17 or 18, because there are many ways you can get a 17 or an 18 with the dice having different values on them. There's only one way to get a 5. There's only one way to get a 30, and that's having all the dice be 1s or all the dice be 6s, and that doesn't happen as often. You can see that in 10,000 rolls, We only rolled a 30 one time, and we only rolled a 5 one time, or 2 times. And that's not a large number. And so now we could create a graph of this to see, what are we looking at here? And we don't want to create a histogram. We want to do the scatter plot again to join these two values. And if you're in Math 220, this should be looking really familiar. This is a nice normal looking distribution. I'm going to change the chart type to column. And then we want our gap width. Double click on a column and just change the gap width to 0. Now this is a nice normal looking distribution, as it should be. What else should we do? What are some things that you should know about Excel? Okay, let's quickly put together a data set. Let's say we just want 100 numbers. So we're just going to have the list 0 through 100. Okay. This is our data set. It's in order. If we wanted to, we could change the order. But this is good. We already went over how to find like the mean, median, mode, the sum. What are some other things we might want to know about a data set? We might want to know what the maximum number is. So what the largest number is. That's called the maximum. And guess what? The function for that is max. And so we could find the max of column A. And we already knew that was 100. We could find the minimum. There's a function called min. And that gives us the minimum out of all the numbers. And obviously we saw the 1 and the 100 because this is already sorted and we created it in this way. But if you had a large data set and you didn't want to look through every single number, these formulas will do that for you. And you don't have to do any more work. But let's say I wanted to manipulate this data a little bit. Maybe for some reason, and I don't know why, I'm just doing a calculation where I want to subtract 10 from every single value in there. Okay. So there's times where, I don't know, you want to do the same thing to multiple values. And actually, let's say we just want to subtract some random value. Let's do a random value between 5 and 20. So this picked 19. And I want to subtract this value, no matter what this value becomes, because as soon as I do a calculation or I refresh this spreadsheet, that value is going to change. So this value is always changing. Look at that. And you might see some numbers show up more than once, and you're like, well, that's not random. Absolutely, it is random. Okay. But I want to subtract 19, or this number, whatever it happens to be, from every single number in my data set. I can do that. And I can do it quickly and easily. So I can create my own formula. So in this column B, cell 1, row 1, I'm going to hit the equal sign. I'm going to click on the number in the previous column. And then I'm going to say, I want to subtract the number that's in this cell. And it did it. Okay. Obviously, this number recalculated. 1 minus 9 is definitely negative 8. But look what happens when I try to copy this formula down the way that we've been talking about it all along. 2 minus 14 is not 2. 3 minus 14 is not 3. 4 minus 14 is not 4. It's almost as if it's not subtracting anything from that number. But I can see that it's subtracting. But what happens is, as I'm copying the formula down, it's copying the cell that's in column A, but it's also copying down from where the number was. So our number started in J9, and now we're in J12. And there is nothing in J12, so it's subtracting nothing from that. So our original formula was flawed, but we can easily change this. So in this formula, if I click on J9 and then I hit F4 on my keyboard, what this does is it locks the reference to this cell. So J9, even if I copy this formula, will always reference J9. It's not going to reference J10 or J11 or J12 as I copy it down. It's only going to reference J9. Now, I don't need a $ in front of the J. I do need it in front of the 9. So this would also work because column J is where I want that to be anyway. And so as I copy this formula down, I would still be in column J. But just to be safe, we're locking both the reference to the column and the reference to the row. So now when I copy this formula, and it just so we get -11 here. Now when I copy this formula down, you can see 1 minus 6 gives me -5. 2 minus 6 gives me -4. 3 minus 6 gives me -3, and so on, because this reference has been locked. It's always referencing J9, and so we don't have to worry about the formula referencing the wrong cell. And so this is called an absolute reference. You can do a partial absolute reference if you get rid of the column or the row. So you could say, no matter what I do, I want it to be column J. It can move up and down. But even if I copy left and right, we're going to stay on column J. If I get rid of the $ in front of J, it's going to say, if I copy left or right, you can move left or right, but it's always going to be row 9 that you're staying on. But typically we're going to use both the column and the row, and that becomes an absolute reference. All right, I am just trying to see, is there anything else that you could possibly want to know about Excel to help you math? And I feel like it's great in any context. I showed you some statistics stuff, but like learning how to use a table is great. When you're looking through large qualitative data sets, like things that have names, phone numbers, addresses, things like that, or just other demographic type information, then the table is definitely the way to go, is to insert a table. And then there's also features like in data, you can, or maybe it's not here. Looking for where the pivot tables are. Oh, pivot chart. So you could actually insert a pivot table instead of a regular table. And this allows you to arrange and summarize a lot of different columns of data using sort of that filter that I showed you on this table, but it's even more advanced than that. We talked a little bit about graphics. If we wanted to create graphics for our data, let's say just the age and name here, our typical charts are things like we could put in a bar chart. And so our bar chart would be, the ages of everybody. We have them sorted here, but we don't have to have them sorted by age. They could be sorted by name, and our bar chart is going to automatically update. You can come in here and create a custom title for this. Team members by age could be your chart. And then we also want to add an axis title. So we could just put names down here. We could put age over here. Typically, we would say in years, we would want to just tell the reader what is the unit for our whatever number we're talking about. Typically ages are in years, but I don't know, these could be in months. And so we would want to let people know that. So we have when you highlight your data, you could insert column chart, line graph, pie chart, scatter plot. You would need two qualitative data sets, so you need a column, two columns with numbers that are linked together. We have a hierarchy chart. So all your charts are here. These are our statistics charts, our histogram, our box and whisker plots. These are things that you would use in a Math 220 if you learn how to do all this on the calculator, but if you wanted to use Excel to crunch some numbers outside of your calculator, if you find that easier, there's an option for you. All right. I think that I've covered the things that I wanted to cover. We went through the basics. We have our column letters. We have our row numbers. You want to put data in vertically. You can create your own formulas. You can use the built-in functions. You can sort your data. You can create a table and sort with more specificity. You can insert graphs. You can add sheets that have more data on them. You can create formulas that reference a single cell and still use the autofill feature if you find the absolute reference to those things. You can, I don't know, we covered a lot of stuff. If some of it was too advanced, it's fine. Rewatch it. Maybe it's not something that you need for now. Maybe it's something that you can use later, but this video will be here for you. I enjoy working with Excel, so if you have any questions, feel free to message me and let me know. My name's John Dickman, and I am one of the foundational instructors here, but I also help out in the math lab in the LRL team. All right, have a great day, everybody, and thanks for coming.